Hello, welcome back. Another lesson now for this Creative Tap Tips and Tricks series. I'm going to go over 10 tips in this lesson. Hopefully you'll learn something from this. Now, first thing we're going to look at is something called dependencies within After Effects. So all I've got going on here, doesn't really matter what I've got going on. I've just got some footage being revealed by some text. Just some generic text, as you can see. Now, if I were to be passing this file on to a client or to another motion graphics artist, it's important that I collect all the files and generate a report for it, okay? Because I've got a piece of footage and some text, and as long as they've got the font, they'll be fine. But if they don't, generate a report to say what font they need. And it also gives them the file, because if you just were to just give them the After Effects file, it would just, just give them that and they'd be missing all the footage. And so that's what we're going to do. Now, if we go up to, if you save your file, which I have, I'll just make sure, yep, saved. If you come to File and go down to Dependencies and click Collect Files, what this will do, it'll give you a little pop-up and collect all source files, yeah, all of them for all comps, but I'll just click all because this can do everything. So there's two files, which is this background footage and this rocket, which I made with inside of Illustrator. It says 2 effects are used throughout the whole thing, which is not just this dependencies composition, it's all these other ones it's going to be collecting for as well. And it's going to generate a report. So you can also add some comments. So you can say, this needs to be completed by the end of the week. Or you may need to say, download fonts from ... or whatever. You may want to give them some instructions. I'm not going to bother giving them comments, to be honest, but you do have that option. Okay, right, so if you just click collect, what it'll do now, it'll say this is where the file's saved, tips 1 to 10, and it'll just save it next to it, and yeah, just go yes, save. So what it'll do, it'll reopen the project, and it's opened this window. So what we've got is so if we come back to lesson 3, we've got this folder, and within inside we've got the footage. So this is this footage which you can see in the back of this text, and then we've got this rocket Adobe Illustrator file which I use in a composition further down here. If we come back out, we've also got this report it generated, which just says what computer was made on, all the compositions, the collected compositions, number of collected files, because there's only 2 files in there, the size of them, where they were sort of on the computer, the rendering plugins, it was using Classic 3D, which is just its own kind of renderer. Effects used 2, these are curves and gradient ramp, which I use somewhere else down here. I think I use curves actually on this footage. Yep, curves, there you go. Layer, it tells you about the text layer, and external dependencies, which are fonts you may have to download from external sources. So that's going to be really helpful if you're passing a file on to somebody else. And as I said, all the footage is going to be in there, however many pieces of footage you have. Okay, so that's really handy if you're passing a file on to somebody else. So that is tip number 1. Now the next one is the align tool. Okay, now a lot of people, I haven't got much going on, I've just got a background and the text that says align. Okay, a lot of people don't actually know about this, but on the right by here you've got something called align. If you can't see it, all you need to do is go to window and make sure align is ticked. Okay, so if you want it, let's say we've got our text just created kind of just by here, and you're thinking, right, where's the dead center going to be? Well, you've got something to help you. With these, you can tell what this one does. Horizontal left alignment, so it's going to drag it all the way just to the left, not up or down, all the way to the far left. So the beginning of it is dead on the left line by there. If we click it again, you can do it all the way to the right, or you can do it horizontal center, and then if you go vertical center, that's going to be dead in the middle of the composition. So again, just do horizontal center, vertical center, and there it's aligned. If you want it animating up from the bottom, you've got vertical bottom alignment and vertical top. So you can kind of move it around like that, okay? So it's aligning it to the composition, okay? So that's a really quick, simple way of making sure something is dead in the middle. And that does it for that one. So if you wanted it scaling up from the middle, you could just animate the scale properties, and it's going to be scaling from the middle. Now the next is something called title action safe. So I've got 2 titles within here, okay? Now let's turn the top one off, and let's turn this little grid off, which I will show you how to get back up. if you were animating titles for a 16:9 ratio, if we turn this grid on, title action safe, it's outside of the edge of this grid, and just to be safe, that's what it's called. You will probably see this on a 16:9 TVs, but some TVs are a little bit stretched at the edges, so it gives us this grid. So let's turn on title 2. You've got to make sure these two inner lines are for 4:3, which I don't think anyone works with anymore, if I'm honest. And this box by here is for where you want your titles to be in. So if it was out here, it's not really in a safe area. Now, quite often you'll want it kind of animating in from left to right, and as long as it kind of finishes in here, we're good. It's just a kind of guideline, but I like using it in my projects just to make sure that whatever device somebody's watching my work on, they can see it, because people will be watching it on laptops, iPads, phones, TVs, possibly, stuff like that. So it's just to kind of help you. And then this outer one is, if you've got any action going on, you want it to be within this, just so it's all seeable as well. Okay, so I normally just keep it within this line if I do have anything, and again, quite often you'll have it coming in from the side. So as long as it kind of finishes within this inner line is kind of my rule, then you're good. So the little animation I got going on is very simple. It just animates down. Okay, but then if we had this other one on that was animating down, it's kind of outside of that kind of safe area. Would be seen on most devices, but it's just easier just to work, if you can, within this title safe area. Okay, and the way I enabled that again was just coming down by here where it says choose grid and guide options. Click in and you can turn title action safe on and off. So there we go for that one. Now the next one is live screenshot with inside of After Effects. So let's say I'm doing a little design and I'm kind of thinking, oh, what color do I want? Do I want this to be a yellow to white gradient, or do I want it to be a blue to white gradient? I won't change it yet. What I can do, this little camera by here, if you click it, it'll take a little snapshot, and the icon next to it saying show snapshot is going to kind of reveal that when we make a change. So it's got that save, that snapshot save. So I'm going to change this to a blue now, because I'm not sure what color I want to go for. And now I can just click this eye and it'll show me when it was yellow, and when I undo my click it'll show me what I've currently got. So you can kind of flick between and you're like, yeah, okay, maybe I prefer the yellow, or at least with that color of text. So then I can just undo, and then I've got that back. Maybe I want to try, well, what's a red going to look like? Not very nice at all. And then you can kind of see the difference. Okay, so this is really, really simple. It just saves a little temporary snapshot of it to your hard drive, and it'll just sit there until you get rid of it. So let's change that back. Now if you ever did want to get rid of all that, because it does save a little file to your temporary drive, all you need to do is go to edit. I think I went over this in an earlier lesson, but purge and then all memory and disk cache, and it'll just get rid of all those sort of files. Excuse me. Now next one, motion path from mask. So let's have a look at this. Okay, so I've got a little rocket, and let's say I want to animate it going around in, I don't know, a sort of weird squiggly line. I could animate the position, but if I get my solid by here, what I can do is on this solid I can get the pen tool and I can draw a mask. Okay, let's say I draw it just like this. Let's go crazy. So this kind of rocket follows this weird path and eventually animates out. Okay, so if I click off now, clicking on this solid, if I hit M twice, I've got this mask. Okay, if I go to my rocket layer and hit P, I've got the position. So what I can do is I can get this mask path, Control C, copy it, click position, Control V, and now I've got, let's just get rid of this black solid. I've got a rocket that follows this path. Okay, and you can click and drag these keyframes to make the animation longer or shorter if you want it a very, very quick one, or if you want it to happen over a longer period of time. Now what I would do, I would go in, if I was using this, I would go in, hit Shift R on the top layer and start animating my rotation. Now I'm not going to do it for the whole thing, but I'd just start animating it so you can see that it kind of follows the path, flying in that direction. But I'm not going to do that for the whole thing because that'll take too long. But you can see just how, you can make it follow a path, and then you'd have to animate the rotation yourself. But anyway, going to delete those animation keyframes for the rotation, but you can see how you can just draw a mask on a solid layer. what I did was, let's delete it again. What I did was selected the position of the rocket, selected the mask path, Control C, select the position, Control V, and then it uses that as a motion path. Okay, so quite a neat trick, save you a lot of time if you want to draw a very specific animation path for something. So next is exporting a frame. Let's say you're working on a piece of motion graphics for an artist, and let's say you're talking to a client and you're asking them, look, do you want motion blur? You know, if I disable motion blur, it doesn't, in my view, it doesn't look as good. But they may be like, oh, what's motion blur? And you can see when I turn it on and off, it's just that little blur on the edge of the pixels. And they may say, oh, I don't know whether I want that. And they may want to see a frame of it. So what you can do is go up to Composition and Save Frame As, and then File. Got your render cuber here. I don't like saving it as a Photoshop file, especially if it's for a client. I'll just save it as a JPEG and click OK. And let's save this to section 2, lesson 3, exporting a frame. Okay, let's just click there and click save. Then click render, and it'll save this just as a still image so you can show a client. So let's go to section 2, I think lesson 3. Exporting a frame, here it is. Double click, open it, you've got it there. Okay, so that's another really neat trick. All I did again, I went to the frame that I wanted to export, and I went to Composition, Save Frame As, File, then changed it to a JPEG, because if you give them if it's a client who doesn't know anything about digital media, they won't want a Photoshop file, so just go JPEG, OK, and then save it to wherever you want, and then just click render, saves that file. Now the next one is gradient overlay. So within After Effects you can apply gradient ramps. Okay, and the normal way you do it is you get a gradient ramp, and you've got the options for linear, which is top to bottom or wherever you move these between these 2 points, or you've got radial, which kind of acts like, you know, sort of circle, but it's either radial or linear, so it's not kind of the best. Now if you want to have more options, what you can do is select this layer, go to Layer, Layer Styles, and these are all the layer styles that you kind of get within Photoshop. So the gradient overlay one, if you then click into blending options, gradient overlay, you've got edit gradient, so you can change the colors within here, kind of like Photoshop again. And let's click this one, color, let's make it a sort of, dark black like that. And you can always add in loads of different ones if you want. Just to be a bit fun and quirky. You can't do this with After Effects' gradient ramp, okay? So we've got that, so let's click OK. You've also got style, so at the moment it's reflecting everything from the middle down, okay? So it's like a reflection, so we haven't got that. All you've got with After Effects gradient ramp is linear and radial, okay? But you've also got other options. You've got angle, so it kind of does it like a sort of clock. You've got reflected, and then you've got diamond. So you've got a lot more options in here. You can alter the scale of it and everything, and offset the points, stuff like that. Let's have a look at the reflected one, stuff like that. So you've got a lot more options in here. So yeah, I would definitely have a look at this if you're ever trying to achieve something that you can't achieve. You've got the opacity of it as well, so you can overlay it on something on top of a piece of footage, maybe choose a blending mode. But this can be a lot more easier if you're looking for something a little bit more, okay? If you're looking for more sort of gradiented colors, because you can add as many colors in here as you wish. So that's kind of often why I use it. Anyway, next one is spacing multiple keyframes. So I've got just a very, very simple animation here of a ball just animating around randomly. Now let's say I'm happy with this. I'm not, because it's just very, very simple animation, but let's say I want this to happen a lot quicker. What a lot of people would start doing is kind of moving them all individually like this, just to get closer together, and that, you know, it's not accurate at all. So what you can do is select all of your keyframes, click and drag this box around them all, then get the last keyframe, hold in Alt, click and drag, and it kind of it uniformly scales them. So we can go from 5 seconds all the way to 2 seconds, and it kind of keeps them the same distance apart. So you're spacing out the keyframes uniformly. Okay, that's a really simple kind of alteration. So they're all still selected. Let's say I want it 3 seconds, hold Alt, click the last one, drag, and then it spaces them out all equally. Okay. Now, next one is parenting layers. Now, let's say we've got a circle, rounded rectangle, pentagon, star, and rectangle, and we all want them to have a little kind of wiggle on there, okay? And we all want them to have the same wiggle. Let's say it's like a little camera shake or something that you're trying to emulate. Now what I've done here, I'm going to delete this null. What I've done here is I've all linked them to have the same animation. I can go in, if I wanted to, and put a wiggle on each of them. So by typing the word wiggle, let me just show you that again, sorry. The way I did that, in case you haven't done expressions before, this is a very, very simple one, is you need to alt-click the position property, hold in Alt, click it, and then, or Option key on a Mac, then type wiggle, open brackets, let's say 5 times a second by 50 pixels. So that means 5 times a second, the circle is going to wiggle in position by 50 pixels. Close brackets, and then this is what we've got. So 5 times a second is going to wiggle by 50 pixels. But let's say we want this animation to happen to all of them. We don't want to have to type it out, you know, another 4 times. So what we can do is I'll just copy this, Control C, and I'll also delete it. So there's nothing there now. What I'll do is go to Layer, New, oh, it just saved, Layer, New, Null Object, and let's call this, rename it to Wiggle. And what I'm going to do is come to the position of this null, just the null, Alt-click, and I'm going to paste that expression in there. If you want to know how to type it again, it's just wiggle, then open brackets, let's say 3 times a second by 400 pixels, so it's going to be, you know, a bit more violent, and close brackets. Now if you play, it's not going to do anything, okay? Well, this sort of null object, this square, is going to wiggle around. Actually, that's too much. So let's go 3 times a second by 100 pixels. Right. So this is a null object, this square. It just means a blank layer. But what we can do, if you click your toggle switches until you see this parent thing by here, it looks like a little whip. What you need to do is select all of your, I'm just going to close these down, select all of your shape layers, or whatever you're using, select them all by clicking the bottom one, and then clicking the top, then get this whip, and click and drag onto this null, okay? So now what will happen, excuse me, is this null object has a wiggle on it, but these are all parented to the null object, so they all do exactly what the null does, okay? So that's a quick way of applying one simple expression. Or if you had keyframes, you can do the same. So let's say they're still linked, but because there's nothing happening on the null anymore, because I just deleted the expression, nothing's going to happen. So let's say I set a keyframe for the null, come forward a few frames, move them over. You can see that all the other whatchamacallits, the other shapes are doing the same because they are still parented. Each of them is connected to null 2. Okay, so let's say I just add some keyframes because it doesn't have to be an expression like the last one was. Now they do exactly as the null object does, and they all move together, so you don't have to put these keyframes on each individual shape layer, which saves a lot of time. Okay, now final tip for this little lesson is how to reveal footage in Explorer. This can be quite helpful if you want to, like, say you're working with somebody and you're working on a piece of footage, just this sort of royalty-free footage I got from the internet. Let's say they say, oh, can you just drag and drop that file onto my memory stick so I can use it in this composition? You may be like, oh, where have I saved it? So the way you do it is, it's called background footage.mp4. Just need to come to it in the project window, right click, reveal in Explorer, and it'll open up, or Finder if you're using Mac, and it'll open it up, and here it is. It's named as something else, but there you go, you've got it. So that concludes the tips 1 to 10. In the next lesson, I'll show you another 10 tips, and then we will move on. So cheers for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next lesson.